Now it's time for the Firehose, powered by Fineros Intelligence. Fineros is a strategic intelligence platform for strategy, sales, product, investment, and procurement teams that delivers decision-grade analysis in minutes without the politics and costs of traditional consulting. It doesn't hallucinate, and it tells it exactly as it is. Increase the productivity of your analysts and reduce your consulting and research spend today. Visit beta.faneros.ai to learn more. California Governor Gavin Newsom has declared a state of emergency following a persistent fire at a Boyle Heights cold storage warehouse. The facility, owned by publicly traded REIT Lineage Logistics, has been burning since June 17th and contains an estimated 85 million pounds of frozen food, signaling potential supply chain disruptions. Mike, what do you have on this one?
Yeah, I think we used Fineros to look into this one, particularly the question around the supply chain. We didn't really look into it just to say, give me some facts about the story, although it does that. What we were really interested in was the strategic question. If you're looking at it as a company, even the company itself, or other companies in the area, if there's going to be a supply crunch, disruption that would materially affect your business. So when we looked into it, what it did is it ripped apart the company, right? Just to figure out who is that company, what's their business model, what's their strategy, what customer segments do they serve, what is the value proposition they offer. One of them is surely not burn 85 million pounds of food, right? So,
yeah.
So we hold it there safely and securely would obviously be one of the value propositions that they would offer. So, but the main question was there a real supply chain angle here that would materially affect the area around there? And what we found out from Fineros was really there might be a very localized effect, maybe 2 to 6 weeks disruption, but the loss of the food is likely total. And that has to do with it was cold storage and this is a fire and it's very hard to stop the burn.
Yeah.
The other thing that it rose to our, that it brought to our attention was that the fire, what it was caused by?
Solar panels, I believe.
Solar panels, a solar array, and they had gotten those, I found out from Fineros, through sustainability initiatives. And that's ironic, right? Because it's supposed to sustain the facility, not burn it down. And it turned out this wasn't the first time that they'd had such a fire from the solar array. So something's going on there. It actually happened during testing. So the broader question that it also raised, and this is one of the values of using Fineros, is that it made you think deeper about the broader strategic questions, which was for supply chains in general, should you concentrate so much food in one facility?
Yeah.
And this is a problem across all supply chains and logistics, right? It's a problem in energy as well, and it's just a nice little framework for you to think about. Is distributed, what do you call that? Inventory, assets better, like more distribution, fewer assets in each of the locations or inventory holds, whatever you want to call that, warehouses, whatever you're using, better, or one centralized hub. We often think that one centralized hub is more efficient, more productive because it's one place and as long as it doesn't burn down. So that's the counter argument is if you concentrate all of your risk in one facility, although it may be more efficient and productive, if something goes wrong, you're in deep trouble, right? So you see this argument with nuclear and with energy in general. And it's a defense issue as well, because if you concentrated all of your energy in nuclear and it gets attacked for whatever reason by hostile players, then you have an issue. But if you were to distribute those in like modular nuclear, for example, and probably this question will come up on data centers as well. Where should they be? And probably that'll be one of Elon's arguments. It's safer in outer space.
That's very, yeah, it's very diversified. For sure.
Yeah, it's more diversified, right? So it was really, I think, a really thorough overview and helps you ask some questions that maybe you wouldn't have asked just from the headlines itself to think through how does this event affect your particular business model? And that's what that product is designed to do, is rip your business model apart and then see how the events around it in the competitive environment affect it.
Yeah. And it goes back to exactly what we were talking about with your book, Fatal Extraction, is that, as you start to govern towards these goals, the P&L, things like risk are easy to kind of disregard for a bit because you're so focused on short-term goals and getting that next quarter bonus for your CEO or whatever the case may be coming down from leadership, that your short-term goals can sometimes push aside those risk analysis, and you can make money in the quick run, in the short run. But in the long run, you're going to have some very risky things happen, and just as we saw with this fire here. So
yeah, and the reason for that is, I think, is because the financial targets are tangible.
Yeah,
they look fixed. They're numbers, so they look real, right? Although, if anybody's ever worked in any sort of investment, every project proposal you see comes with a hockey stick projection, right? They're all going to blow up, and 99% of them fail.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of hallucination going on, even in Excel sheets, from people putting it in there already. So yeah, you think, right? I have these tangible business cases and financial plans, but behind them, there's a whole hell of a lot of assumptions about the actual world around you. And Fineros is designed to find out about that qualitative aspect of the world around you. How does the Strait of Hormuz affect your supply chain, your suppliers? When you get a credit rating from like Dun & Bradstreet, for example, why does the credit rating look like that? What is happening in that business's environment?
What are their incentives?
Awesome. Yeah. Exactly. Right. So that's what it's designed to do. And we're going to use it more often during the show. And we invite you to try it out. But Fatal Abstraction is the intellectual foundation of the product.
Absolutely. All right. Snap, which I confused with that's our government, basically food stamp program now. It's called Snap. So when I first read this, I was a little bit confused. Snap has unveiled Specs, its long-awaited AR glasses, with pre-orders open now and shipping this fall. See, I was thinking AR glasses were going to be... anyway, the price is more than double what most analysts expected at $2,195, and the stock dropped on that news. Have you checked them out?
Who's going to buy these? And this sounds like the metaverse thing. Sounds like a bunch of tech people got around and thought, this is going to be cool. We can put all this tech into the glasses. You can play video games. You can do contextual AI, which is like you can point at something, look at it, and ask questions about it, I assume.
Yeah.
The AI helps you learn about it. Now, instead of your eyes hallucinating, the AI does it for you, I guess. So I just don't know who the hell will buy this. Is it a toy? Is it useful? And I'm not bashing it. I just don't know the answer, right? Is there a segment out there for us besides like early fanboy tech people?
Well, I think
at that price.
I think, because of the price, I think the nearest analogy we have for this is the Apple Vision Pro. So the headset. And people did walk around with those. I saw a lot of YouTube videos. Casey Neistat wore one around New York for an entire day, I remember. And they were big when they first came out. And I think the return quantities on those were through the roof. People used them for a week and returned them because there wasn't really much to do. Because this has some of the same factors that it had. Is it's basically making your workspace all over your house, essentially, making big screens here and big screens there, but you're wearing something on your face for hours. And I have VR gear. I've had it for 5, 6, 7 years. I don't know, whenever it first started getting big. And, I could go out and buy a new VR headset today and it wouldn't be that much ahead of the one I have now because we just haven't really advanced. I could have told you that AR and VR is a really cool party trick and you think it's really great for the first couple weeks, but that's it. Like, it's just a party trick.
They should sell it out of Spencer's then.
They probably will eventually. I don't know. I am seeing the Meta glasses around a lot more as a status symbol. I don't think people actually use them. The battery life is complete trash, I hear. And really, the only thing that they're good for is taking like creepy
4
pictures.
hours.
Yeah. So I just think it's more of a, you can see the cameras. Oh, wow, cool.
Maybe there are some medical cases where this might be useful, the augmented reality or safety. We looked at that with some of our innovation teams. Could you use AR for safety on the production line, for example? Maybe it would be useful there to always give you helpful reminders.
It's funny. The most interesting functionality of this, and it's kind of funny because when was golf. So looking at a green and reading the terrain is something that it can do because it's stereoscopic cameras. It can look at depth. So it could read, in theory, I don't know how good it's going to be, but it could read the terrain in golf and give you a read. It's interesting because when GPS was first coming out and they were first having GPS wearables, like I had this big Motorola thing. It's over here in my watch. If I ever want to show it sometime, it's back there in this watch case. Anyways, but when it first came out, I thought the coolest feature that GPS had was you could get your distance to the hole. I don't even play golf, but I thought it was like, oh my gosh, man. Whew.
Yeah, my problem in golf has nothing to do with that. It's everything else but what you see.
I have a baseball swing, and I have never tried to fix it.
Exactly. I have the Happy Gilmore swing.
Yeah, all right. Tech layoffs hit nearly 40,000 last month alone, the highest single month in 2 years, with AI cited as the top reason. We've talked about this over and over and over for the third month running now. Companies are posting record profits while cutting tens of thousands of jobs. Mike, this is like a broken record here, right?
It's a broken record. It looks like people are catching on to this. And what they're calling it, though, is mismanagement.
Mm-hmm.
This is interesting. So this is the critique of some of these. It's that you're very profitable and you're shedding jobs while you're doing that. It looks like you hired a bunch of fat before that.
Yeah.
I don't know if that story plays very well because of the incentives. The incentives of top management are to always juice the EBIT to hit their current financial plan.
Yeah.
But I don't think they've been shy about letting people go in the past.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that story actually makes sense. The bigger problem is I think it's more about the bad incentives, that I can juice the numbers and I have a cover for it called AI. And this is where you come back to my book. Look at those companies, dig into them, and see, are they doing anything at all with AI? Can you name the business model? Can you name the customer problem, the value proposition, the solution that would justify letting people go? So now a counter argument would be, yeah, well, they're not using it for new business models. Maybe they're just using it for more productivity and efficiency. Instead of having 10 analysts, we can cut it down to one because Claude is doing all the work.
Yeah.
Right, that would be more of a bottom line play, productivity, etc. I would like to see the data on that, if that's really true, because there is that study out there from MIT. Dan Toma mentioned it earlier on one of our shows, that 95% of AI projects fail.
Yep.
And I think most of them start on those efficiencies and productivity plays. And I know we've talked to CFOs, they've seen no return on that stuff.
Yeah.
Now, why? I will tell you, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't try AI. Most innovation fails. 95% would look like a normal number, particularly when you're doing something fundamentally new. So I really don't know what's going on here, but I do think that's exactly one of those fatal abstraction examples where you will want to dig in and see what's going on.
Well, it's interesting the take that, TechCrunch referred to it as a powder keg.
Yeah.
I think we're starting to have exhaustion from this, from the whole, I have to mention AI and AI related layoffs in my earnings call. And that way Wall Street's going to respond positively that, they're AI forward, AI thinking. Now we're going to reward them.
It's the new digitalization.
Yeah. We've talked to the top strategists on this show. Dan and Scott Newton also said AI theater was just rampant. Like it was just going through the act for the stock hit essentially and not really doing anything. And I think that's where we are because we keep hearing reports after reports after reports that this is not being adopted for anything useful at all.
Well, and here's the thing. I said, one of the good metrics that I like to use is like, hey, if an executive has more AI posts on LinkedIn than actual AI projects, that's a problem, right? That's a metric that tells you it's hype.
Yep.
The other problem is, to be fair, I'm learning from talking to people out in corporations, there aren't many people who know what AI even is or what it can be used for.
Yeah.
And I'm going to assume the executives have no clue either. And they're just going based on news stories and highly abstract, again, the fatal abstraction, highly abstract news stories about theoretical ways you could cut productivity or increase productivity, right? Increase efficiency, cut headcount,
Yeah.
cut the fat. And that's all they need. That's all they need to hear. And then, well, let's go for it, And then what are the actual AI projects? Again, just ask. If you're on the board there, ask. Ask for the details beyond just the hype. That's on the board too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think we do need to do a standalone episode on leadership structure and how we might be able to reform it. All right, let's now look at the Financial Times report. They say that Huawei has made real progress on chip stacking to increase the amount of transistors it can fit into an area, which increases chip performance. They should have 1.4 nanometer capability by 2031, thereby, in a way, sidestepping U.S. sanctions, but really, I don't think they're sidestepping much. They're just making it on their own, right, Mike?
Yeah, so markets always find substitutes and workarounds. This is why, although sanctions are popular as a virtue signaling or a moral signaling tool in politics, they almost uniformly, economists think they're a dumb idea. Yeah. They virtually achieve nothing. They just reroute you to other providers and suppliers who don't care about your sanctions, right? We've seen this in Russia, Ukraine.
Yep.
Russia just finds new suppliers from other parts of the world. And then you who are enforcing the sanctions actually end up with the supply problem if you are depending on Russian gas. Hello, Europe, right? So it's well known that if you create such an incentive, people will just find another way around it. They did it in the Soviet Union when products from other countries were banned. They just found a way to smuggle them in.
Yeah.
So this has been known. I mean, you see it with vaping laws and cigarette laws, even in New York. They'll find a way to get black market ones in. So the issue is not always the supply; it's the demand, right? And if there's a demand, you're always going to find a willing supplier. And I talked about this earlier. It was not a surprise to me that this could backfire and the Chinese find more efficient ways, better workarounds, better technologies and substitutes. It gives you have such an incentive to do it. So not a surprise to me. It's almost predictable when you see sanctions and protectionism.
It's a global economy. There's nothing we can do to change that. It is going to always be, from this point forward, a global economy just because we all have our specializations, things that we're good at.
Hey, with SpaceX, Jason, it's going to be a universal economy.
Oh, okay.
That's why they're at 2.4 trillion.
They're going to change the world. Okay. I think I think the best innovation comes out of necessity. And
yes, exactly.
If by imposing sanctions, we're just making them,
you incentivize them.
They're going to have breakthroughs.
Yes.
Okay. Bipartisan bill, Great American Artificial Intelligence Act, has been introduced to the Senate, which would set transparency mandates, preempt some state AI laws, and fund AI safety and workforce programs. Did you read that one, Mike?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, I took a look at it. Let's just say the source is the Cato Institute. They're pretty much a free market libertarian unit, so you know the bias when you're listening to us, but I found it very interesting. The acronym of this law could not be worse. I won't go into that, but I'm sure if you look at it, you'll figure out what I mean by that statement. We just talked about with the erratic policy shifts towards Anthropic from the administration that is not good for the development of any business, whether it's AI or otherwise. And this seems to be an attempt to bring at least an initial framework that will make things more predictable, right? At least some guardrails out there, right? That businesses can play by, which makes it easier for them to staff, to make decisions, where to put capital, etc. And three things caught my eye here. The state law preemption we talked about, because I think I said that even on the last episode, that the next thing that's going to happen is an AI regime for every 50, each of the 50 states. And that's not good either, because it makes it difficult to do business across state lines. That does not mean that there aren't legitimate concerns at the local level, right? Where how AI affects Oklahoma, for example, may be significantly different from New York, where you have one has a massive financial regime. Oklahoma has what? Well, we just talked about casinos, oil, land, right? A lot of land. But I mean, Oklahoma's actually booming. There was a story out there on the 8 states that are booming. It's one of them, so I don't want to put down Oklahoma. But so that was interesting. And what it preempts is the states couldn't make AI development laws. It's kind of like car manufacturing is at the federal level, the manufacturing stuff, the safety standards, and it would be kind of like that. What are the safety standards around AI development, the training, the models? Deployment and implementation would stick with the states, is what I read there. So that's interesting. But it's only for 3 years with the option to renew, and Congress people love to renew laws forevermore. It's hard to ever repeal any law that's ever been written. Transparency was another one. And it's basically, to make it simple, they want and this probably has to do with the open AI suits, they want the models, the foundation models, the labs to show their work.
Yeah.
Show what the intended use is, show the risks in the model, and basically just make that available for the government to see. That would not be significantly different from most products, right?
Yeah.
You need to reveal the processes, not like probably the IP involved, but at least make sure that we understand the data you're using, the privacy, the safety around it. And then the last was employment displacement. So if AI were to start to replace people, what sort of programs would be offered? Unemployment programs, retraining programs. I think it was more focused on retraining. So those are three broad things that stood out to me. Yeah. I don't know. Anything else catch your eye?
The duty of care was, I think a lot of this stuff is good. I don't know about the displaced workers. I don't know that jives with my personal politics, but also the duty of care. It goes right back to the same thing we were talking about with Anthropic getting blacklisted by the government. Just, even though they're one out of many who can do that same thing, they got blacklisted. This, to me, could be very much abuse the duty of care, which that means, this is stating by law, companies have a obligation to make sure their product meets a certain standard. That standard's a little bit opaque as far as this stuff reads. So it needs a lot more clarity around what that duty of care actually means before someone can come in and shut a company down or model down or version down or, overstep the line. That line needs to be drawn on the sand a little bit more clearly for me. But I think it's, something that needs to happen. There needs to be some sort of framework.
It's a hard topic. I mean, it's hard for us to keep up with AI.
Yeah.
Imagine congressmen and congresswomen have zero clue about AI, and probably the lobbyists are writing the bills, right? Somebody, probably the interns. So I think it's hard to keep up with, and you don't want to put too many constraints on because then you can kill it, the development of it. So there's some balance between a general framework, guidelines, a framework, right, and not deterministic thousands of lines of code that you have to follow before you even know what it is. That would be more in the European direction.
Yep. 2 ex-OpenAI designers built a tool that asks the frontier models what each one remembers about a given person, displaying rankings based on who is most accurately found in the AI data. I think Macaulay Culkin from Home Alone fame is the top of the leaderboard right now. What do you think about that?
Does not surprise me. This is like some sort of vanity metric thing.
Yeah.
Right? And you know what I started thinking about? Well, hell, people pay tons of money to boost social media posts, to get their likeness out there, probably to have Wikipedia articles written about them. Who knows what's going on behind the scenes and the kickbacks. Would you pay to be in the weights, Jason?
I don't know. Probably not right now.
Yeah. But you can imagine a market to get into the weights.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Well, it depends on what they're training on, right? But maybe there's something to monetize there. I don't know. But
that's
something I care about.
We have a web presence. And so I, have been reading lately about artificial intelligence engine optimization versus search engine optimization. So artificial intelligence optimization is the new go forward. Whereas we used to optimize for search engines, and we would have to write, have a bold line of text here. This is what it's about. Very clearly, you would label the description of this video, for instance, in a certain way so that Google their search engine crawler could come and read it, know exactly what it is, and lead people to their intended target. Now, you want to come off as an authority because you're more likely to get listed in the AI summary up the top, like, as the link, or, it'll link to you as if you're the credible source. So then there's a different practice now that's coming out from, AI search versus old school search. So things are shifting right now. So this doesn't surprise me that this came out. I think it's a fun way to display the information. Obviously, who got, I don't even know the parameters of like, how did we measure that Macaulay Culkin was measured accurately? Like, how do you accurately measure that which is a person? I don't know. But maybe it was the mistakes or something like that. Maybe it was that. Anyways, who knows? Interesting stuff. I love that when that comes up, we can at least find new ways to measure people. We always seem to want to have more of that. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission issued cause orders to the 6 largest U.S. grid operators, directing new rules so AI data center connection costs do not get passed on to regular taxpayer ratepayers, and also so the grid connections can happen faster. Mike, we talked about that many weeks ago about getting people hooked up to the grid a lot faster.
Yeah. The concern here is something called moral hazard. Do you know what moral hazard is? It's
Duke's
a situation. Hazard? No, it's an economic concept, basically, where if you remember the banking crisis, it's the idea that you can privatize gains and socialize losses. So a bailout does that. Okay. So the companies that took massive risk and the executives privatized the gains, they still get their bonuses.
Yep.
And they're allowed to not go bankrupt and spread those losses to the taxpayers.
Yep.
This is the kind of socialism I think people hate. But it is socialism, right? You socialize the cost of an organization.
Yep.
And that's what would be going on here. And typically the way that you get around that is to assign the cost to the people who generate them.
It's crazy thought.
Yeah, crazy thought, right? Like, you end up in this debate on, health insurance is one. I'm just going to poke the bear a little bit here. Where should I have to subsidize people who take or make really bad decisions about their own body? They abuse alcohol, or they're morbidly obese. Should I have to subsidize them? What is the responsibility of the person, provided they don't have some, reason for that behavior that's genetic or psychological? But, that's what we mean by assign cost to the people who generate it. That way they would then change their behavior. What you don't want to do is give them the opportunity to socialize their cost, because then who has an incentive to reduce their cost and be more efficient?
No one.
Not them.
Yeah.
Right? That's a problem.
Yeah.
So you really, in that case, and it's hard for regulators, I think, to make them bear the cost of their own business. But I can't think of any moral philosophy where you shouldn't have to bear the cost of your own business.
Right. That's the promise. That's a promise loophole. You want to look for those things if you're the business to maximize your P&L, but I don't want it on my household budget.
It's a subsidy in some ways, right? And this is one of the issues with subsidies is it's taxpayers funding it, and the ones who receive it, they don't ever become disciplined on the market. They don't find a business model that works efficiently because their costs are getting covered. Chinese companies run into this problem a lot because they'll often sell things below cost. I think EV is happening right now. They sell things below cost, and if those subsidies get withdrawn, you're in deep trouble.
Yeah. You
can't maintain those prices. Germany's whole solar industry fell because of this, right? You could argue that probably OpenAI, it wasn't exactly that, but they had too much cash. And they never figured out a business model because they never developed that discipline. That's not moral hazard necessarily, but it is a problem when somebody's flush with cash and it just keeps coming. It looks like it's never going to end, and they just never learn to fend for themselves.
Yeah. I think OpenAI is a good call out there. Probably is an AI startup, and it raised $9 million to build a rigorous verification layer for AI outputs, chasing 99.99% accuracy and attempting to rid the world of AI hallucinations. Mike, this should be close to your heart.
this is close to my heart. It keeps happening over and over and over. And I don't see it changing with 4.8 Opus or Fable or Mythos. And there are two things going on, right? So one is, and this is what you have to think about. And we had this problem when we're building Fineros, that for strategic intelligence, you have two things you got to do. One is you got to determine the actual facts on the ground.
Yep.
And there you cannot afford any hallucinations. Now, this does not mean that human analysts are better at that. They also have to depend on third parties. You don't know if they made it up, whether that data has integrity. People often game that too, right? So you have to think about what is the proper standard. So but it is our standard to say if there are facts being cited, financials, other things, right? Scientific research, technologies that exist, they must exist. So you have to verify that. The problem is, no matter which model you use, they make stuff up.
Yeah.
They'll create. We had a startup due diligence function, and one time we ran it on a startup that didn't exist, and it analyzed it perfectly. It just didn't exist. Right? That cannot happen.
Yeah.
So what Probably is doing is what we've had to do, the same thing, is build a system around those models that guarantees that the entities actually exist, that the facts are actually the facts, that when you use sources online or research or APIs, you have two problems. One is that the source actually exists. And then two, if you cite the source, that what's at the source is actually what's at the source and is used. Now, that's for deterministic data gathering. And that looks to be where Probably is going with it. But you don't want to get rid of reasoning on facts.
Yeah.
And you don't want to get rid of speculation on facts. That's a legitimate use of AI. Like in wargaming, you wouldn't want to get rid of the scenarios because they're not real, right? That's just a useful mental model to think through based on the facts on the ground and what could be plausible scenarios, right? So you have to make that distinction. There's the deterministic data gathering layer, and then there's the reasoning above it and the speculation above it. I think that you want to keep. That's the valuable part of AI, to see, because they're elite pattern matchers, to see the patterns that might exist in the world. But in order to get that to a really good level and to trust it, you have to have facts that you can trust. And that's where they're going. I think there's absolutely a business there. I even think there's going to be business in cleaning up all of this vibe coded stuff that people have put out there that are just hallucinating stuff left and right. And users, and maybe this is something that needs to come out in legislation at some point. Users need to educate themselves that these hallucinations are real. Because people will ask us, why should we use you over the base models? Because they hallucinate, and you should never make a financial decision, a strategic decision based on the base models that hallucinate. You want to have something like Probably in place that cleans up the data, make sure it's all real, and then have something like ours where you can reason over it really well.
Yep.
Yeah?
Yeah. Makes sense.
And then there's Allbirds.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to make a side note here. I'd like to update our audience to one of the show's favorite companies. It's Allbirds. Their AI pivot was called New Bird AI. Now they want to be referred to as Smart Bird instead of New Bird AI. So I think it's likely in response to this next story, which states that 60% of U.S. consumers say AI in a brand messaging is actually a turnoff. So hence Smart Bird. And separate Pew Research survey just found 16% of Americans think AI will, only 16% think AI will have a positive impact on society.
Yeah, I wonder why that is. Because the people running the marketing for these companies are terrible at marketing.
Well,
actually, it depends, right?
Who are they marketing
J.D. Vance actually made a statement on this. I thought it was actually a pretty good statement. He said, I think they have an incentive to forecast doomsday scenarios. Right? And the reasoning was, well, it's not exactly the case that they want to avoid regulation, because regulation increases the cost of doing business, and they're already flush with cash, so they don't care about that, and they get to write the rules probably. But if you're the new startup coming up, that's going to be very difficult to compete. The other is doomsday gets you into the news and kind of a Streisand effect.
Mm-hmm.
And you can then counter market and say, well, we're the one you can trust and all this stuff, right? So being in the news for bad things isn't always bad, but they focused a lot on these doomsday scenarios. Think about it. Anthropic itself was talking about how powerful Mythos was. It could be really dangerous.
Yeah.
Look where that landed them. Elon and the others have talked about you're not going to have a job. Well,
Right.
the people hearing that didn't hear the second part was like nobody's going to have a job because nobody's going to have to work. They're just hearing this, you're not going to have a job, you're going to take my job. I can't even think of very many positive stories from them on the marketing side. There's been some stuff around medicine that you and I talked about that was good.
Yeah.
And then the news, this is the other problem. The news feast on negative information. Low probability negative information. So whatever people are hearing about AI is coming through the news on top of the bad marketing. And that's almost exclusively negative. But I want to just say one thing. I do not know what people mean by AI when they're doing these polls. I don't know what's in their heads when they say, what is your view of AI? Because AI is a very complex topic, broad topic. So do you mean vision, LLMs? What do you mean? It's not clear to me. And these polls are always written in a way that how can you trust them if you don't know what the listener's thinking?
Yeah. So I guess my dilemma or my internal struggle is I think the marketing's not been for the masses. At some point, marketing has been to adopters, companies that are going to buy the product. They're going to buy the product because they're not having to pay employees now. They would rather pay a definitive, a monthly cost
FOMO.
for something.
It's FOMO.
Sure.
Get on board before it's too late.
So that's been the marketing play. We saw Artisan, that company that had the marketing play, like stop hiring humans was their marketing campaign. But they're marketing to businesses. So that's the way you market to businesses, the people who are going to actually pay for your product today. So I don't
That's
know.
how you market to American businesses. It's not how you're going to market to European businesses. They could never even admit that that's what's happening.
Well, at some point, we had the, I'm thinking about Lose the Crowd, Rome, Gladiator. I'm thinking about that right now because you want to win the crowd with the games. And I'm also thinking about the 250 UFC fight we just had. You want to win the crowds in the games. So at some point, the marketing to business owners and business executives is going to reach a point where you're going to lose the public so much on AI that no one's going to want to do business with those companies, boycotts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that tipping point is going to happen it's going to be a balancing act here, I think.
Maybe.
And maybe it is just bad.
I think the other view is AI is here to stay. It is transformative.
Yeah.
And this public backlash, I think it's typical with new technologies. It'll eventually pass.
It will. Yeah, it will. Okay.
Especially Americans have such a short attention span. There'll be something else to freak out about in the next year. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Pavel Durov argues the UK's under 16 social media ban and its Online Safety Act age check framework amount to a backdoor for mandatory digital ID, warning that it could sink any autonomy we have left on the internet. What do you think?
This is a typical slippery slope argument.
Yep.
You know what a slippery slope argument is? It's basically if we allow this one to enter, then the rest of the arguments will fall like dominoes. And there's a gate that we can't let you through. And once you're through it, all hell breaks loose, right?
Yeah.
The floodgates open then. So it's like this gate is holding the flood at bay. This does happen in government. You see from one government to the next, you'll see the next regime use the laws of the previous regime to go after their opponents. It's like one of my favorite political philosophers, his statement is simply, if you ever want to think about whether a law is good, imagine the worst thing your opponent can do with it. And that does happen, right? So we've seen conspiracy laws get changed or reinterpreted by the last two regimes against their political opponents. It can happen. It won't always happen. Sometimes these come across as doomsday arguments, but we can barely interpret. So take this AI law, the framework that we talked about, the GAAA, how many A's, and then an I, and then an A. Mm-hmm. 250 pages. There are so many opportunities for that to get misinterpreted once it gets handed over to the executive branch.
Yep.
And then the executive branch is a lot about policy interpretation. So once you hand it over and it's in law, who knows how that thing gets implemented? So I don't know if it's the same in the UK. I'm assuming it is. It depends on how that thing's written, whether it's properly scoped and whether it can expand. But precedents can lead to slippery slopes.
Well, yeah, I'm kind of torn on this one. I am in favor of privacy, but I also think that our online presence today has become so synonymous with who we are as a person that maybe it is time that we don't have an anonymity on the web at a base level.
Well, yeah, that's something I actually share with you, and I wonder why. For example, when I open a bank, they're getting really good at show your passport, show your video or a picture, and they're getting good at identity confirmations, right?
Yep.
I don't know why we couldn't do that for like X and other things, other than maybe they don't want to. Maybe the bots help juice the advertising dollars. No. I don't know. But what's behind this? If you remember when we were talking to Rita, she was talking about Jonathan Haidt's work. Mm-hmm. And Jonathan Haidt has written a lot about why these bans may make sense, because I want to give the other side.
Sure.
Right? So one side is privacy, but the trade-off is, what if social media has unleashed a mental health crisis among young people? And Jonathan Haidt suggests that that's true. There is other research out there that says it's not true. The effect, if anything, is barely at all. And maybe the mental health crisis is actually from the schools and not actually from social media. That would be a heavy indictment on our schooling. But that's the intention behind, I think, some of these bans, is that it seems to be having a negative effect on teens, causing higher suicide rates, etc. And the argument is, well, maybe humans, because Jonathan Haidt goes into a lot of evolutionary psychology, maybe humans have not figured out how to properly deal with social media yet. It's very young technology. It doesn't seem like it, but maybe we just haven't figured out how to behave. And if you look at any platform, I don't think you would have any trouble finding examples of we don't know how to behave on social media.
Yeah.
Read YouTube comments.
Yeah.
Just read any X, right? Post.
Yeah. I don't know. I think social media is a phase. I think it's a phase of humanity that will go away. I think AI is going to change it a lot. We're going to get really overwhelmed with AI content, and we're just going to get tired of it. I think eventually, most of us will. I think eventually we'll all get tired of enough where the critical mass leaves the internet in that daily social media capacity. And the internet will be a place for our AI to interact with each other and communicate, whatever. But I don't know. I feel like there's something bigger and better beyond this. I just don't know. I don't know what that is. We'll find out.
I don't think vanity is disappearing from humans.
No.
The need for attention is not disappearing. And as long as that exists, I just said that earlier, as long as there's a demand, you're going to find a supply. And whether it's what we think of as social media or AI fundamentally transform it, there's probably going to be a supply for this. There's an influencing economy. It's huge. There's too much money to be made.
Interesting. Big discussions. All right. Good stuff, Mike. Hey, you've just watched a clip from Show Your Priors podcast. Check out our main channel for full episodes. We have a new one every Tuesday. If you liked what you saw, give us a like and subscribe. It's free for you and helps us out a ton. Did we miss something during our discussions? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks, and we'll see you on the next one.